Welcome to my channel. AI is driving a lot of changes in the world, and I try to cover everything that you need to know in order to stay ahead. My name is Yishai, and today we're going to be talking about several stories, including how a German startup is deploying AI-controlled cyber cockroaches for military surveillance. You heard that right. Anthropic's CEO is predicting that 50% of entry-level white-collar jobs are going to be gone within 3 years. And Sam Altman of OpenAI is revealing their endgame plan, which is to charge on the meter for intelligence, similar to how you pay your water or electricity bill. Let's jump right in. I actually want to start with a little bit of a different direction, which is talking about hardware. And there's an interesting thing that's developing, which is, as you know, Nvidia is the leader in the infrastructure for AI. They're making all the chips that AI is run on. You're probably heard of that or are aware of it. And what this means is, they've been the leader in developing GPUs, graphic processing units, way back in the day. And this is what you wanted if you were playing a video game or you were doing any kind of graphic intensive work. You wanted the Nvidia GPUs. And what happened is when the world started to shift to LLMs, and that became a big technology, they discovered immediately that GPUs were actually the right chip to use, not the CPUs, because GPUs are optimized for doing the same task over and over again, whereas CPUs are better for doing lots of different tasks. So long story short, the GPU is what the world embraced for developing AI. However, we now understand that when you train AI, you want to do that with the GPU, but for actually running the AI, you need a different type of chip. And this is a big opening that somebody could try to take on Nvidia. And it also means there's going to be a lot of new development in the hardware space, and not just in the AI space, but in the hardware space as things are built out to actually lay the foundations and infrastructure that's needed to run AI at scale. Let's jump to the next story, which is the German startup that's controlling cockroaches as military spy units. So what this is that a German startup is called Swarm Biotactics. They're deploying live cockroaches with NATO customers. This is an active deployment that's on the market. NATO and maybe other armies as well are buying these cockroaches, and basically they carry these AI chips on their back. They carry cameras, they carry microphones, and they have a secure communication thing on their back. So the technology is there now where all of this can fit on the back of a cockroach, and they can be steered by the operator who's watching and listening with electronic signals that go into their nervous system. And 1 year ago, this couldn't exist. That's what the CEO, Stefan Wilhelm, has said. They have over 40 engineers. They've raised $14 million, and they've validated this system. So we're going to see more stuff like this where the line between biology and biotics is being erased, especially when it comes to military deployments. This could be, something that could break open a whole new category of low cost and untraceable surveillance. And, if you're focused on anything in the space of security or military or defense tech, this is something that you should definitely be watching carefully. Strategies on the battlefield in terms of spy tech are going to be shifting and changing with these types of developments. Now, let's talk about a similar story in some ways, although very, very different in other ways, which is a humanoid robot. So staying in the field of robotics, but in this case, it's not a bio-robot. It's a robot that looks like biology, a humanoid robot. And there was this humanoid robot that malfunctioned in China, in a Chinese restaurant, and had to be tackled by several workers because it started a dance routine. So apparently that's in its programming. It can do dances. It started smashing dishes and dancing and was acting erratic, was being dangerous. Several workers had to tackle it, didn't know how to turn it off. And it's kind of a disturbing video. There's people screaming and things. I don't think anybody was hurt, but it's a little bit weird. It's a little bit comical. It's a little bit weird, this thing that happened. But when we talk about robotics, we need to understand that we need to figure out how to make them safe. And so if you're in the robotic world at all, you need to make sure that you're making these robots safe, that they have fail-safe to turn off. So the tech is quickly getting there, but we have to figure out how do you make sure that they're turned off. Now, let's talk about Sam Altman talking about AI being a metered utility. So he gave a speech recently on stage. He was being interviewed, and he talks about, direct quote, "We see a future where intelligence is a utility, like electricity or water, and people buy it from us on a meter." Now, a lot of people kind of freaked out about this. They thought it was evil, like, it was trying to gatekeep intelligence and sell it back to us. And, they stole all of the human creations in order to feed these models, and then now they're trying to sell it back to us like it's a utility company, but it's not going to be regulated, and it's a monopoly and stuff. And I think it was really the wrong take. I mean, I think maybe it wasn't the best analogy that Sam Altman could have come up with, because people had kind of this political reaction to it. But this is something that I've been saying for a while now, which is that these LLM companies are going to become something like a commodity where you can switch and deploy to whichever one you want, and the rates are going to be pretty cheap for this intelligence, because basically you're going to have a lot of LLMs. I cover this in other videos, so I don't want to go too much in depth here, but you have a lot of different AI companies that actually run the LLMs, and they are all going to have similar-ish capabilities. There's going to be cheaper models, there's going to be more expensive models, so you can kind of choose which one you want, but the price is going to be driven down simply by the fact that most applications, you're going to be able to choose which AI system you want to run, and you can just switch to it in an instant, and you can get the best value for the best price. And all of these AIs are going to be running on some kind of GPU or other type of infrastructure in big data centers, and they're just going to try to drive the cost down, and this is how it's going to work. It's not going to be like electricity or water where you can only get one source. So that's why people were concerned about it, but it's just not the reality. I mean, with your electricity or water company, typically they're regulated. If they're not public, they're regulated because you're kind of beholden to that one source, right? There's one electric company or one water company that you can buy from, and so governments regulate them and fix the prices, and they have to operate in certain ways, because otherwise it just wouldn't be fair to the consumer. It's an automatic monopoly. It's not going to be the case with the LLM, where you can just change your provider. So, that's really what he's talking about. And it's interesting because it's a big problem for OpenAI and for all these companies if they wind up in a scenario where people are just shopping around for the cheapest, which is definitely going to happen, the cheapest and best, then they can't really make a lot of money. That's why they're going so hard at the application layer, actually deploying end-to-end type solutions that replace software, but that you're have to use their LLMs. If you're using Claude Code or Claude Cowork, or you're using Codex from OpenAI, you have to stick with that AI system. Whereas if you're using like Cursor, for example, you could switch to whichever one you want. So these companies are trying to go after the application layer so that they don't just become cheap commodities. Now, when we talk about OpenAI and where they're at with their business, they're struggling. They did have an enterprise monopoly. I mean, I remember not so long ago, people were declaring the race was already over. I mean, Microsoft took a huge stake in them. Apple decided to use them for their devices, for their intelligence, and they were at 50% market share of enterprises when you talk about large language model APIs back in 2022, towards the end of 2022. And Anthropic was at like 12%, and Meta was at about 15%, Google was at about 8%. So you had OpenAI way up there at 50, the closest competitor was actually Meta, around 15%. That was at the end of 2022. Now, since then, it's just been a straight dive for OpenAI. Meta's tanked as well, and Google and Anthropic have just risen. So now Anthropic is in the lead at over 30%, and OpenAI has dropped to about 25%. So the trend is there that OpenAI is absolutely tanking and Anthropic is rising. Also recently, Microsoft announced that their Copilot is going to work with Anthropic as well as OpenAI, which is huge. I mean, OpenAI had the monopoly for everything running through Microsoft, which powers a huge number of enterprises, and so that's gone. So they really need to figure out how to pivot and win that back. And it is going to be tricky because they've really been optimizing for offering cheap chat intelligence. And yes, I know, Codex apparently does great at coding, so they definitely haven't given up there, but that seems to be the main way they're going. If you can just take the words of Sam Altman, even criticizing Anthropic for being like a rich product for rich people and saying that he wanted to offer intelligence to everybody. It's all said and good, but now the market reality is showing that they're losing to the enterprises. And also knowing that, when you talk about just providing the intelligence, that's going to be a commodity. Where does this leave them? In a bit of trouble. So they're now pivoting. Wall Street Journal came out and said they're trying to focus their core business now around the business offerings and around vibe coding, which goes directly against some of the things Sam Altman is focused on. So, I think we'll have to see where that goes. It seems like there's been now suddenly been a lot of pressure on OpenAI to actually execute a proper business and not just focus purely on building the biggest data centers the world has ever seen with the most investment money the world has ever seen and trying to win in that way, because it's not really a winning play. So we'll have to see, when is the pricing pressure going to hit on these LLMs, because cloud code is also losing a lot of money. And some people say, it's only a matter of time before suddenly it's going to cost you 10 times as much. And then are you still going to be trying to replace your workforce or hiring one developer instead of 10 when your cloud code is going to cost you 10 times as much? Well, I don't think it's that simple, because I do think that there's going to be forces that are going to drive the pricing down as you build more data centers. But when are they going to have the push to say that they suddenly have to show profitability or at least some form of financial stability? There will be a moment when that's going to happen. And when it happens, is it going to result in a 10 times price increase? Is it going to be no price increase because they solved the infrastructure layer and drove their costs down? Or is it going to be, 3 times price increase? Because this obviously has huge implications. If it's a 3 times price increase, maybe it's still low enough that you can run your AI systems profitably and still have the same argument that you want to replace headcount with AI if you're a company. That could happen. But if it's 10 times as expensive, where does that leave us? So we don't really know what's going to happen with AI. I mean, we know it's a powerful technology. We know it's going to have the power to replace a lot of things, but there's a big question that when it's all said and done, when the landscape kind of settles, when the context windows have been built, when the infrastructure has been built to a level that's reasonable, when the power pricing has come down, where are we going to land once the world has actually embraced AI? It could be that it is the fundamental transformation that most people think it's going to be, and it could also be that it doesn't quite get there because of power constraints, because of just effectiveness in its own understanding and actually managing its context properly. Are we going to reach a point where we realize, well, this is really good for certain things and you can kind of speed up your initial process, but when it comes to the long term, we can't actually really rely on this technology? That is, I think, still possible. We don't yet really know which way that's going. Now, there's a user on X, David Kramer's his name, and his handle is @Zeeg, Z-E-E-G, that had a nice quote that says, "I'm fully convinced that LLMs are not an actual net productivity boost today. They remove the barrier to get started, but they may create increasingly complex software, which does not appear to be maintainable so far in many situations. They appear to slow down long-term velocity." And so this is a point, I don't necessarily agree with this, but it might be true. So I do want to raise it. In my experience with AI, doing things when you're early in your company or when you're early in an idea is just incredible. I mean, I can have an idea and say, I'd like to, start this business, and I can kind of have the business operational by the end of the day. I can have a software deployed, I can have a deck, I can have a sales pitch, I can have an email campaign set up, I can have, a whole infrastructure, project management infrastructure. I can have a whole infrastructure set up by the end of the day, which is, it's just remarkable, And if the next day I say, I'm meeting an important sales lead, I need to have a nice presentation ready, I can tell it to make it and it can be done in 30 seconds. and now I have a presentation that's beautiful, that's ready to present. So things like that, it's just incredible. But when you talk about long scale building and scaling infrastructure and managing infrastructure, it becomes more complicated. And we still haven't really seen AI adopted at like an enterprise level, meaning, yes, a lot of individuals are using it. In certain applications, it's rolled out for narrow things like chatbots and things like that, or doing certain research. But for actually deployed as like infrastructure that's managing work end to end, we're not there yet. So will we get there? The world certainly seems to think so. I mean, every study and statistic is saying that that's where we're going, because definitely the business pressure is in that direction. But we don't yet know that the technology is truly capable of executing true enterprise grade work. So we'll have to see where that goes. Now, little interesting data point, because I'm based in Israel, I live in Israel, I'm Israeli. I think this is interesting. The world leader in Claude AI usage per capita is Israel. It makes sense. I mean, the concentration of tech startups in Israel is higher than anywhere in the world except for Silicon Valley, and I believe there's one other. Is it maybe Singapore? I can't remember the second, but it's in the top three. And so it makes sense that would be the case. There's a lot of defense tech and stuff in Israel as well, but just thought that was an interesting data point to throw in there. Now, if you compared it maybe to a region, I bet you if you looked at like Silicon Valley, probably it would beat Israel. I don't know, but Israel's the advantage that it's also a small country if you measure country by country. Now, let's talk about one more story. This is going to be a short one today, but I want to talk about what Dario Modi, the CEO of Anthropic, said, which is that 50% of entry-level white-collar jobs will be gone in 3 years. Now, in the long run, AI will not end work. Elon Musk says that it will, and some other people say that it will, that people aren't going to be working in the future. I think it fundamentally misses what is the reality of work. Work, if you want to get philosophical, but it's also just technically true, is something that one person does for somebody else in exchange for another form of value. So that's not going to go away. People are always going to find things that other people want done that they can trade for money. It doesn't matter if we're living in a utopia and there's no work to be done because we sit around and our food is brought to us by a robot and robots take care of everything and there's nothing to do. Even so, there's still services, there's still things that other humans will want us to do, and it's in human nature to seek out a way to trade value in the marketplace. That's what I believe. So jobs will not go away. I'm painting the most extreme scenario of even in a utopia situation, there's still jobs, there's still money being traded. But so that's kind of the long game. Now, medium term, we know that there will be, I think, a massive boom in smaller businesses that execute things with the help of AI. I mean, it's definitely started already, but I think it's going to really expand. I mean, I think most people in the world, if you talk to them and ask them what they love to be doing for work, I think most of them would say they'd like to run their own business. And I think with the power of AI, it makes it a lot easier and it makes it possible. And, this is not necessarily just talking about software. Definitely not. I mean, it could be somebody that wants to, make knitted hats. Now, the fact that they can use AI to build their website and be a very nice website, to manage their accounting, to run the inventory properly on their website, to take orders, to interface with customers through some sort of chatbot, to help them manage their emails, to help them do all of their legal terms and contracts and register their business properly, to build their logo, to do job postings and help them even interview candidates. Every single thing, help them with the shipping logistics, make sure that they're profitable, that their pricing margins are set correctly, do market research, help them write email campaigns, help them do advertising, plan ads correctly, and including teaching them things that they never knew. I mean, how many people that have this dream to do something that's like a craft style business, and I'm using that as specifically a low tech example, how many of them, don't know how to do half of these things properly, or, maybe they don't know how to run ads properly. AI can help them do all these things, and so they can be successful. So I think this is true whether you're an electrician, you're a carpenter, you're a software developer, you're a coach of some kind, you're an athlete, all across the board, you can do a lot more with a lot less, and you can run a business on your own. And that wasn't necessarily true a few years ago. So I think as we see like job replacement happening with especially like white collar type of jobs, this is where, this is why you need to watch stuff like this podcast and other places to learn like what do you need to know about AI in order to stay ahead. Because if you're leaving college soon and you've been trained as a developer and you're going to get a job as a developer, or even like a financial analyst, let's say, and that's your training and that's the job you want to get, well, I have bad news and good news. Bad news is I do think a lot of those jobs are going away. I do see that companies that have figured out how to not increase headcount or even decrease headcount, aka lay people off, and have told their boards, we're pivoting to AI first style work, our headcount costs are going to go way, way, way down. They're getting better valuations. The market is responding that they like that. They want to see that. And so a lot of people are upset about that. My job's going to go away. They're worried. I get that. So I would just say, stay ahead and start opening a business now even. Start deploying things that you can sell, and it's just so much easier today. And so I think that the pain of this job displacement is going to be a lot less than the worst case predictions sound, because we will see most of these people that are going to lose their job or maybe never get the job that they were trained for will be able to take that same training and amplify it with the power of AI in a way that they can build a business that's probably more in line with their actual real passions anyway than the work that they would be doing. And so I think, it's hard to say, what each individual person's going to do. I don't have a lot of sympathy for people that refuse to embrace technology changes and then feel like they're entitled to a job and are upset that they don't have one. I get that, if you've been a bookkeeper for 15 years and maybe work part-time and, that's been your kind of important to your family that you're able to have that income, and now you're going to be laid off because AI can do your job. I have sympathy for that. I really get the pain of that. That's been something reliable. You've been providing value. You're not trying to stay ahead with technology. You're just trying to do a good job. You don't want to learn this whole new skill set. But even for that person, I would encourage you, start experimenting with AI, see what you can do with it, and try to start setting up your own business. Because if it sounds really daunting, it's really not that daunting anymore. It's something that you really can do. And in the end, I think you can be happier for it. So I'm going to stop there, and I will do another one of these this week. And please give me feedback, comments. Let me know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe as we grow, but especially please comment and let me know that you appreciate the content and what was the most interesting, where you would like to see this content go in terms of the topics we cover. I'm really trying to drill down to figure out, what you guys really want to hear about, what's the most interesting thing. So please let me know in the comments. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.